Rowley ended up getting grounded for that whole haunted house mess yesterday. He's not allowed to watch TV for a week, and he's not allowed to have me over at his house during that time. That last part really isn't fair, because that's punishing me, and I didn't even do anything wrong. And now, where am I supposed to play my video games? Anyway, I felt kind of bad for Rowley, so tonight, I tried to make it up to him. I turned on one of Rowley's favorite TV shows, and I did a play-by-play over the phone, so he could kind of experience it that way. Wow, look at the size of that flamethrower! Oh yeah, never mind. I did my best to keep up with what was going on the screen, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure if Rowley was getting the full effect. I bet this part is gonna be funny. Whoop, haha, I was right, it was funny. Tuesday. Well, Rowley's grounding is finally over, and just in time for Halloween too. I went up to his house to check out his costume, and I have to admit, I'm a little jealous. Rowley's mom got him this night costume that's way cooler than his costume from last year. His night outfit came with a helmet and a shield, and a real sword and everything. I've never had a store-bought costume before. I still haven't figured out what I'm gonna go as tomorrow night, so I'll probably just throw something together at the last minute. I figure maybe I'll bring back the toilet paper mummy again. But I think it's supposed to rain tomorrow night, so that might not be the smartest choice. In the past few years, the grown-ups in my neighborhood have been getting cranky about my lame costumes, and I'm starting to think it's actually having an effect on the amount of candy I'm bringing in. What are you supposed to be? A cowboy. But I don't really have time to put together a good costume, because I'm in charge of planning out the best route for me and Rowley to take tomorrow night. This year, I've come up with a plan that'll get us at least twice the candy we scored last year. Halloween. About an hour before we were supposed to start trick-or-treating, I still didn't have a costume. At that point, I was seriously thinking about going as a cowboy for the second year in a row. But then Mom knocked at my door and handed me a pirate costume with an eye patch and a hook and everything. Rowley showed up around 6:30 wearing his night costume, but it didn't look anything like it looked yesterday. Rowley's mom made all these safety improvements to it, and you couldn't even tell what he was supposed to be anymore. She cut out a big hole in front of the helmet so he could see better, and covered him up in all the reflective tape. She made him wear his winter coat underneath everything, and she replaced his sword with a glow stick. I grabbed my pillowcase, and me and Rowley started to head out. But Mom stopped us before we could get out the door. I want you to take Manny with you. Man, I should have known there was a catch when Mom gave me that costume. I told Mom there was no way we were taking Manny with us, because we were going to hit 152 houses in 3 hours. And plus, we were going to be on Snake Road, which is way too dangerous for a little kid like Manny. I should never have mentioned that last part, because the next thing I knew, Mom was telling Dad he had to go along with us to make sure we didn't step foot outside our neighborhood. Dad tried to squirm out of it, but once Mom makes up her mind, there's no way you can change it. Slam. Before we even got out of our own driveway, we ran into our neighbor Mr. Mitchell and his kid Jeremy, so of course, they tagged along with us. Manny and Jeremy wouldn't trick-or-treat at any houses with spooky decorations on them, so that ruled out pretty much every house on our block. Dad and Mr. Mitchell started talking about football or something, and every time one of them wanted to make a point, they'd stop walking. Blah, 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 blah. So we were hitting only about one house every 20 minutes. After a couple of hours, Dad and Mr. Mitchell took the little kids home. I was glad, because that meant me and Rowley could take off. My pillowcase was almost empty, so I wanted to make up as much time as possible. A little while later, Rowley told me he needed a potty break. I made him hold off for another 45 minutes, but by the time we got to my grandma's house, it was pretty clear that if I didn't let Rowley use the bathroom, it was gonna get messy. So I told Rowley if he wasn't back outside in 1 minute, I was gonna start helping myself to his candy. After that, we headed back out on the road, but it was already 10:30, and I guess that's when most grown-ups decide Halloween is over. You can kind of tell because that's when they start coming to the door in their pajamas and giving you the evil eye. We decided to head home. We made up a lot of time after Dad and Manny left, so I was pretty satisfied with how much candy we took in. When we were halfway home, this pickup truck came roaring down the street with a bunch of high school kids in it. The kid in the back was holding a fire extinguisher, and when the truck passed us by, he opened fire. Whoosh! I have to give Rowley credit, because he blocked about 95% of the water with his shield. And if he hadn't done that, all our candy would have gotten soaked. When the truck drove away, I yelled out something that I regretted about 2 seconds later. "We're calling the cops!" The driver slammed on the brakes and he turned his truck around. Me and Rowley started running, but those guys were right on our heels. The only place I could think of that was safe was Grandma's house. So we cut through a couple backyards to get there. Grandma was in bed already, but I knew she keeps a key under the mat on her front porch. Once we got inside, I looked out the window to see if those guys had followed us, and sure enough, they did. I tried to trick them into leaving, but they wouldn't budge. Well, I guess now that we're safe in our own house, you can't get us. After a while, we realized the teenagers were going to wait us out. So we decided we were just going to have to spend the night at Grandma's. That's when we started getting cocky, making monkey noises at the teenagers and whatnot. Well, at least I was making monkey noises. Rowley was kind of making owl noises, but I guess it was the same general idea. Ooh, ooh, ee, ee, ah, ah, ooh, ooh. I called Mom to tell her we were going to crash at Grandma's for the night, but Mom sounded really mad on the phone. She said it was a school night and that we had to get home right that instant. So that meant we were going to have to make a run for it. I looked out the window, and this time, I didn't see the truck. But I knew those guys were hiding somewhere and were just trying to draw us out. So we snuck out the back door, hopped over Grandma's fence, and ran all the way to Snake Road. I figured our chances were better there because there aren't any streetlights. Snake Road is scary enough on its own without having a truckload of teenagers hunting you down. Every time we saw a car coming, we dove into the bushes. It must have taken us a half hour to go 100 yards. But believe it or not, we made it all the way home without getting caught. Neither one of us let our guard down until we got to my driveway. But right then, there was this awful scream, and we saw a big wave of water coming toward us. Splash! Man, I forgot all about Dad, and we totally paid the price for it. Whoops. When me and Rowley got inside, we laid out all our candy on the kitchen table. The only things we could salvage were a couple of mints that were wrapped in cellophane, and the toothbrushes Dr. Garrison gave us. I think next Halloween, I'll just stay home and mooch some Butterfingers from the bowl Mom keeps on top of the refrigerator. November. Thursday. On the bus ride into school today, we passed by Grandma's house. It got rolled up with toilet paper last night, which I guess was no big surprise. I do feel a little bad because it looked like it was going to take a long time to clean up. But on the bright side, Grandma is retired, so she probably didn't have anything planned for today anyway. Wednesday. In third period, Mr. Underwood, our phys ed teacher, announced that the boys will be doing a wrestling unit for the next 6 weeks. If there's one thing most boys in my school are into, it's professional wrestling. So Mr. Underwood might as well have set off a bomb. Lunch comes right after phys ed, and the cafeteria was a complete madhouse. I don't know what the school is thinking having a wrestling unit. But I decided if I don't want to get twisted into a pretzel for the next month and a half, I'd better do my homework on this wrestling business. So I rented a couple of video games to learn some moves. And you know what? After a while, I was really starting to get the hang of it. Does this feel right? Yes, no, help! In fact, the other kids in my class had better look out, because if I keep this up, I could be a real threat. Then again, I better make sure I don't do too good. This kid named Preston Mudd got named Athlete of the Month for being the best player in the basketball unit. So they put his picture in the hallway. P. Mudd, Athlete of the Month. It took people about 5 seconds to realize how P. Mudd sounded when you said it out loud. And after that, it was all over for Preston. P. Mudd, P. Mudd. Thursday. Well, I found out today that the kind of wrestling Mr. Underwood is teaching is completely different from the kind they do on TV. First of all, we have to wear these things called singlets, which look like those bathing suits they used to wear in the 1800s. And second of all, there are no pile drivers or hitting people over the heads with chairs or anything like that. There's not even a ring with ropes around it. It's just basically a sweaty mat that smells like it's never been washed before. Mr. Underwood started asking for volunteers so he could demonstrate some wrestling holds. But there was no way I was going to raise my hand. Me and Rowley tried to hide out in the back of the gym near the curtain. But that's when the girls were doing their gymnastics unit. Hee hee hee. We got out of there in a hurry, and we went back to where the rest of the guys were. Mr. Underwood singled me out, probably because I'm the lightest kid in the class. And he could toss me around without straining himself. He showed everybody how to do all these things called a half Nelson and a reversal and a takedown and stuff like that. When he was doing this one move called the fireman's carry, I felt a breeze down below, and I could tell you my sight wasn't doing a good job keeping me covered. That's when I thanked my lucky stars the girls were on the other side of the gym. Mr. Underwood divided us up into weight groups. I was pretty happy about that at first because it meant I wasn't going to have to wrestle kids like Benny Wells, who can bench press 250 pounds. But then I found out who I did have to wrestle. And I would have traded for Benny Wells in a heartbeat. Greg, you'll be paired up with Frankley here. Frankley was the only kid light enough to be in my weight class. And apparently, Frankley was paying attention when Mr. Underwood was giving instructions, because he pinned me every which way you can imagine. I spent my 7th period getting way more familiar with Frankley than I ever wanted to be. Tuesday. The wrestling unit has totally turned our school upside down. Now kids are wrestling in the hallways, in the classrooms, you name it. But the 15 minutes after lunch, where they let us outside, is the worst. You can't walk 5 feet without tripping over a couple of kids going at it. I just try to keep to my distance. And mark my words, one of these fools is going to roll right onto the cheese and start the cheese touch all over again.